The grand hall was filled with a buzz of excitement and tension. Alien hunters from every corner of the universe gathered in the colossal arena, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. It was a spectacle that promised blood, glory, and the chance to prove who was the most dangerous creature alive. The hunters were all larger than life. Some had scales, others had fur, and some had armor that looked like it was forged in the deepest parts of space. Each one was stronger, faster, and more lethal than the last. They were the best of the best, the champions of their worlds, ready to fight to the death for the honor of being called the strongest. And yet there was one hunter sitting quietly at the back of the room. He was different. His clothes were tattered, his face worn with years of hardship, and his body was not as muscular or towering as the others. His name was James Carter, and he was human. The room fell silent as the tournament master, a towering alien with 6 arms and a head full of sharp, gleaming teeth, stepped forward. He surveyed the crowd, his deep voice rumbling through the hall. "Welcome, warriors. The tournament begins today. Only the strongest will survive, but beware, this is no ordinary contest. The trials will test your skill, your strength, and your resolve. Only those who conquer all will emerge victorious." James sat quietly, his eyes taking in the other hunters. They were all so different, so imposing. Yet despite their size, their power, and their fearsome appearances, James wasn't intimidated. He knew they would underestimate him, and that would be his advantage. He wasn't here by accident. He had fought and survived his way through galaxies, through wars, and through impossible odds. He had been to places no one should have survived. And though his body was tired, though his wounds ran deep, he still had the fire within him, the fire that had kept him alive when others would have fallen. The crowd continued to murmur, unaware of the quiet, scarred man who sat at the back. They didn't know his story. They didn't know what he had done, what he had overcome. They didn't know that this tournament, this challenge, was nothing compared to what he had already faced. James leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. He wasn't afraid. He had learned long ago that fear was just another weapon the universe used to break you, but it couldn't break him, not anymore. The first challenge was called, and the roar of excitement filled the air. The massive doors to the arena opened, and out strode the first contestant. A giant alien, its scales glistening like black steel, with 4 powerful arms and a jaw that could crush bone with a single bite. It was a predator made for combat, and its eyes locked onto its opponent, a mechanical creature, half beast, half machine, that stomped into the arena with its glowing red eyes and steel claws. The crowd erupted into applause, the tension building as the 2 opponents squared off. The tournament master raised his hand, signaling the start of the fight. The giant alien roared, charging forward, its claws slashing the air. The mechanical creature responded in kind, raising its massive metal fists. It was a battle of titans. The audience roared as the creatures clashed, their movements so fast and brutal that it was impossible to keep track of everything happening at once. Sparks flew as metal collided with flesh. The alien swung its claws, but the mechanical beast was quicker, ducking and countering with powerful punches that shook the entire arena. The fight dragged on, neither side willing to give an inch. The alien hunter was strong, but the machine was relentless, its mechanical precision cutting through the alien's defenses. James watched from the back of the room, his eyes calm. He had seen battles like this before. He knew what to expect. But what no one knew was that he wasn't just watching for entertainment. He was studying. He was waiting for the moment when the tide of battle would turn. The alien hunter was tiring. Its massive arms were slowing, and it was starting to leave openings. The mechanical beast noticed this, and with a calculated strike, it sent the alien crashing to the ground. The crowd erupted into cheers, but James remained still. He had seen enough. The alien hunter, despite its strength, had failed to adapt. The mechanical beast had won, not by brute force, but by precision and calculation. The tournament master spoke again, his voice booming across the room. "The first battle is over. The mechanical beast has won. Let the next challenger step forward." The alien hunters began to move, but all eyes shifted toward James. He stood slowly, his posture relaxed but firm. The crowd parted as he made his way toward the arena. No one knew what to expect. Most of the hunters sneered, thinking it was a joke. A human, they thought. What could a human possibly do in a contest like this? James didn't need to answer them. His actions would speak for themselves. The tournament master looked down at him, his many eyes narrowing. "And now, the human, you will fight in the same manner as the others. No weapons, just raw combat." James nodded, stepping into the arena with nothing but his bare hands. The door behind him slammed shut, and the air in the arena grew thick with anticipation. The creature he was facing was a monstrous thing, covered in thick, leathery skin. Its eyes glowed yellow, and its breath came out in huffs, like steam escaping from a furnace. The creature let out a low growl, testing James with its stare. The crowd was silent, waiting for James to make the first move. The human was outmatched, outclassed in every way, but James was patient. He knew how to fight, how to survive. He would wait for his opening. The creature lunged forward, claws extended. James barely moved, ducking under the swipe and rolling to the side. He was faster than the creature had anticipated, faster than anyone had anticipated. He stood up, steadying himself. He was no longer the underdog, he was the storm waiting to break. And in that moment, every hunter in the room knew. The human was not weak, he was the most dangerous creature in the room. The arena was silent as James stood at the center, facing his monstrous opponent. The creature's yellow eyes glowed with malice, its muscles rippling beneath its thick, leathery skin. It was a predator, designed for one thing, to kill, and it seemed to sense that James was the prey. The crowd, still reeling from the last battle, watched with growing anticipation. No one believed that the human would survive. He had no armor, no weapons, nothing but his bare hands. Against a creature of this size and power, it seemed like a hopeless fight. Yet James's eyes, those tired, determined eyes, told a different story. He wasn't scared, not anymore. The tournament master stood at the edge of the arena, his many eyes watching every movement closely. "Begin!" he roared, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. The creature lunged forward, its claws outstretched. It was fast, faster than James expected. The impact of its feet hitting the ground caused a shockwave that reverberated throughout the arena, sending dust into the air. The creature's roar echoed, shaking the walls. James was barely able to dodge the first swipe, the claws missing him by inches. But he wasn't panicking. He knew the creature's strength. He could feel the weight of its presence in the air, the way the ground trembled with each step it took. It was a killing machine, but it had a weakness, speed. It relied on brute force, and that's where James had an advantage. He took a deep breath and darted to the side. The creature followed him with its eyes, growling as it took another swing, but James was already gone. He could feel the sweat running down his back, but his mind was focused. He wasn't here to fight for glory. He was here to survive. The creature roared in frustration, turning quickly and trying to corner him. It didn't understand. James wasn't running. He was waiting for the right moment to strike. The crowd started to murmur. The sight of the human dodging, evading the creature's every move, was unsettling. For a moment, James could feel their eyes on him, unsure of what to make of this fight. They didn't see a man, they saw a survivor, someone who had already been tested in ways they couldn't even imagine. The creature charged again, this time with more speed, more anger. It swung its claws in a wide arc, aiming to rip James apart. But James had already anticipated the move. With a sharp twist of his body, he ducked under the strike and used the creature's momentum against it. He grabbed hold of the beast's arm and swung his legs around its body, using his weight to destabilize it. The creature stumbled, its claws scraping the dirt as it tried to regain its footing. James wasted no time. He kicked the creature's legs out from under it, sending it crashing to the ground with a heavy thud. The arena was suddenly deafeningly silent. No one expected this. James stood over the creature, his chest heaving with every breath. He could feel the energy draining from him. His body wasn't built for this. He wasn't a predator. He was something different, a survivor, a human. The creature wasn't finished yet. It shook its head, growling, pushing itself up. It was angrier now, more determined to crush this human who dared challenge it. James's eyes flickered with understanding. This creature wasn't just a mindless animal. It had a cunning to it, a desire to win that matched his own. The beast charged again, but this time James didn't move. He stood his ground, his mind working quickly. He saw the opening, the small crack in the creature's defense. The moment it lunged, he leapt forward, grabbing one of the beast's arms and twisting it sharply. There was a sickening crack as the creature's elbow broke under the pressure. It roared in pain, but James wasn't done. He used his momentum to flip the creature over, slamming it hard into the dirt. The crowd gasped, shocked by the speed and precision of the human's movements. James stood over the creature again, his breath ragged, his body aching. His muscles screamed at him to stop, but he didn't listen. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was his chance to show the universe what humanity was capable of. The creature was weakened, but it wasn't defeated. It snarled, trying to push itself up. But this time, James was ready. He spotted the creature's weak spot, a gap in its armor where its ribs were exposed. Without thinking, he dove forward, his fist connecting with the exposed flesh with all the strength he had left. The beast's roar turned into a strangled gasp as James's fist sank deep into its chest. He twisted, and with a final, powerful movement, he pushed all of his weight into the strike. The creature collapsed with a thud, its body going limp beneath him. The arena was deathly quiet for a long moment. James stood, panting heavily, his body trembling with exhaustion. His heart pounded in his chest, but it wasn't from fear. It was from the rush of survival, the rush of knowing that he had made it through. Against all odds, he had defeated the beast. Slowly, the crowd began to murmur. The tournament master's many eyes were wide with disbelief, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. They had expected a massacre, but what they had seen was something far different. The human had fought with intelligence, with agility, with a cold, calculated ruthlessness that no one had expected. And as the tournament master's eyes shifted toward him, James felt a sudden weight on his shoulders. This was no longer just about survival. It was about proving to the universe that humanity had a place among the stars, that no matter how many times it was knocked down, it would always rise again. The tournament master's voice echoed in the arena, breaking the silence. The human wins, the challenge is over. The crowd erupted into applause, but James didn't hear it. He was already walking out of the arena, his mind already on the next challenge. He had faced the first test and won, but the tournament was far from over. There were more beasts, more monsters, more hunters waiting to take him down. But James Carter wasn't afraid. He had fought and survived battles that no one else could even imagine. And he was ready to show the galaxy that humanity was far more dangerous than anyone had ever thought. As James walked away from the arena, the whispers began again. The other hunters looked at him with a mix of awe and fear, uncertain of what to expect next. One thing was clear: the human had just proven himself, and they would never underestimate him again. And James, he wasn't done, not by a long shot. The cheers from the crowd still echoed in the arena as James Carter walked off the field, his muscles sore and his body drenched in sweat. He had done the impossible. He had beaten the creature, the one no one thought a human could ever defeat. And yet there he was, alive and standing tall, but the battle was far from over. As James exited the arena, he could feel the weight of the eyes on him. The hunters, the ones who had once sneered and laughed at him, were now silent. They didn't know what to make of him. He wasn't like them. He didn't have the strength of the behemoth aliens, the scales, or the advanced technology. But he had something else, something that made him dangerous in ways they couldn't understand. It was his mind, his survival instinct. The tournament master, towering and foreboding, stood at the center of the arena. His many eyes watched James with a cold, calculating gaze. The master had seen hundreds of battles, hundreds of hunters fall and rise, but never before had he seen a human perform like this. He hadn't expected much from James, but now he was starting to wonder. "You have won your first challenge, human," the tournament master said, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "But know this is just the beginning. The real trials are yet to come." James didn't flinch. He didn't need to say anything. He had already proved himself once. He would do it again. The next challenge was announced. A new creature, even more terrifying than the last, was brought in. A massive alien predator with scales as dark as the void and teeth sharp enough to tear through steel. Its roar sent shivers down the spines of even the most hardened hunters. But the tournament master's voice rang through the hall, making it clear. "This creature will face you in the next round, human." The crowd went silent. It was an even bigger test than before. No one knew what to expect. They had seen James dodge, outwit, and outlast his first opponent, but this was something else entirely. The new creature was called Ragnarok. Its body was armored in thick, jagged scales, and its claws were as long as swords. It stood twice as tall as the last creature James had fought. Its eyes, glowing a deep red, locked onto James with a predatory glare. James knew this would be different. Ragnarok wasn't just some animal. It was a predator, a warrior in its own right. It had the strength to crush him in a single blow, and it wasn't going to give up easily. But James had been in worse situations. He had faced death more times than he could count and had always found a way out. This time wouldn't be any different. The tournament master raised his arm, signaling the start of the battle. Ragnarok charged, its massive claws cutting through the air with a speed that belied its size. The ground trembled with each step it took, its roar shaking the arena. James didn't wait for the creature to reach him. He moved quickly, dodging to the side, his body low to the ground. The creature's claws missed by mere inches, but James wasn't interested in simply dodging. He needed to find an opening, a weakness. He watched the creature carefully, nodding the way it moved, the way its body swayed. Ragnarok swung its claws again, faster this time, but James was ready. He ducked beneath the strike and grabbed hold of the creature's arm, using its momentum to pull himself up onto its back. The crowd gasped, but James didn't have time to bask in the surprise. He had only moments before the creature would shake him off. With all his strength, James drove his elbow into the creature's neck. It howled in pain, but it wasn't enough to bring it down. Ragnarok swung its body violently, trying to knock James off, but he held on, his legs wrapped tightly around the creature's thick scales. James could feel the heat radiating off the creature's body. Its muscles rippled beneath him, each movement more powerful than the last. He needed to end this fight quickly before he was thrown off, or worse, before the creature crushed him. He glanced around, looking for anything he could use. His eyes landed on a loose piece of metal that had fallen from the arena's structure. With a quick motion, he grabbed it and plunged it deep into the creature's side. The metal dug into its flesh, and the creature shrieked in pain. But it wasn't enough. The creature swiped at James with its claws, and in that moment James knew that the fight was turning. He had been fighting with everything he had, but now he was starting to feel the toll of the battle. His body was bruised, his breath ragged, but his mind was sharp. He couldn't lose, not like this. The creature, desperate to rid itself of James, made one final, furious swipe. Its claws caught James across the chest, sending him flying back into the dirt. Pain exploded through his body, but he didn't stop. He could feel his blood staining his clothes, but he forced himself to stand. Ragnarok advanced, its eyes glowing brighter, its hunger for destruction increasing. It wasn't just about winning anymore, it was about hunting, and James was its prey. But then James smiled, a dark and determined grin. He had been waiting for this. He had been waiting for the moment when he could use the creature's own fury against it. He baited the creature with a quick feint, causing it to charge again. This time, when Ragnarok's claws reached for him, James leapt to the side, grabbing the creature's arm as it passed. With every ounce of strength he had left, he twisted the creature's arm and shoved it into the steel support beam in the arena's corner. The impact was deafening. Ragnarok roared, its claws scraping against the metal as it tried to free itself. But it was too late. The damage had been done. The creature staggered, its body weakened from the sudden strike. James wasted no time. He rushed forward, his body burning with the last remnants of his energy. With one final, forceful punch, he struck the creature's vulnerable neck. The beast collapsed with a thud, defeated. The crowd went silent once more, as if they couldn't believe their eyes. The tournament master's eyes widened in shock, his many faces contorting in disbelief. James had done it again. Against all odds, he had defeated another monstrous creature, one that had terrified even the strongest hunters. The arena erupted into a mix of disbelief and reluctant admiration. James Carter had once again proven that no matter how powerful the enemy, no matter the odds, humanity had something they couldn't measure. It was the strength of the human spirit, the will to survive, the drive to fight no matter what. And though James's body ached and his vision blurred from the exhaustion, he stood tall, ready for whatever challenge came next. Because the tournament wasn't over, not yet, and James Carter was just getting started. The fight was about to begin. The crowd's roar still echoed in James's ears as he walked out of the arena, his steps slow and heavy with exhaustion. His chest burned with every breath, and his body was covered in bruises, but he was alive. He had done it again. He had taken down Ragnarok, the fierce beast that had left the other hunters trembling. But even as his mind celebrated his victory, something felt off. The cheers, the applause, the respect from the other hunters, it all felt distant, hollow. James had faced creatures beyond belief, survived wars and battles that no one thought possible. And yet here in this moment, something gnawed at him, a feeling that he wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for something more, but he didn't know what. As James walked through the hall toward the exit, his eyes scanned the faces of the other hunters. Some were nodding in grudging respect, while others looked at him with distrust. They didn't understand what made him so dangerous. He wasn't like them. He didn't have the raw power of the alien beasts. He didn't have advanced weapons or technology, but he had something they didn't. He had the will to fight, to keep going when every instinct screamed to stop. And that made him more dangerous than any creature they could throw at him. But there was one hunter who didn't look at James with respect. One hunter whose eyes burned with something else. Rickson. The towering alien was still standing by the edge of the arena, his gaze locked onto James. His massive form looked like it was carved from stone, his sharp claws glinting in the light. He had always been the champion, the one everyone feared, the one who had never lost. And now, it seemed, James was the one who had taken his place. Rickson's eyes narrowed as James approached, a low growl rumbling from deep in his chest. He wasn't just angry, he was jealous. "Impressive," Rickson said, his voice like gravel. "You defeated Ragnarok, but don't think that means you're the strongest here, human." James stopped, facing Rickson without flinching. He wasn't afraid. He knew what Rickson was doing, trying to provoke him to shake his confidence. But James wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. He had been through too much to be scared now. "You think you're the toughest thing in this arena?" James asked, his voice calm but firm. "You're just another predator I've faced worse." Rickson sneered, his massive form taking a step closer. The tension in the air was thick, the other hunters watching the confrontation with bated breath. "You don't know what it's like to truly hunt, to be at the top of the food chain. You'll never understand." James's eyes narrowed, but he didn't respond. He knew Rickson was trying to get under his skin. He had seen it 100 times before, the arrogant hunter who thought his strength made him untouchable. But James wasn't just a fighter. He was a survivor, and that was something no amount of strength could match. Before either of them could speak again, the tournament master's voice rang through the hall, cutting through the tension like a blade. "The next challenge will begin soon," he announced. "But first we have a surprise, a twist that will test your loyalty and your true nature." James's brow furrowed. What did the tournament master mean by that? He had already fought two of the deadliest creatures in the galaxy, but now the game was changing. The rules were shifting, and James wasn't sure what to expect. The crowd quieted as the tournament master stepped forward, his many eyes scanning the room. "The next challenge is not about strength or skill. It is about trust. You will have to decide whether you will stand by your fellow hunters or betray them." The words hung in the air like a weight. Betrayal. James's mind raced. This wasn't just a tournament of physical strength anymore. This was a game of the mind, a test of alliances. It was a reminder that in this arena no one could be trusted, not even the humans. The master's voice grew darker. "One of you will be assigned a task. Your mission is simple: betray your teammate to gain the upper hand. The prize for success is immense, but the cost of failure is death." James's stomach twisted. The rules had changed. This wasn't about winning anymore. This was about survival in a world where loyalty meant nothing. The master turned to the group of hunters. "You will all be paired with another hunter. You will either fight together or you will be forced to betray each other. Choose wisely. Your lives depend on it." James felt a cold chill crawl up his spine. His eyes instinctively turned to Rickson, whose smirk only deepened. James had no doubt that the giant alien would do whatever it took to win. Rickson didn't care about loyalty. He only cared about domination. As the tournament master finished speaking, the pairs were chosen. James was paired with Vera, a sleek and agile alien whose eyes gleamed with intelligence. She was quick, sharp, and appeared to be as calculating as James himself. "Don't disappoint me, human," Rickson said under his breath as he was paired with another hunter. The venom in his voice was unmistakable. James clenched his fists but didn't respond. He wasn't here to make friends. He was here to survive. The arena doors opened again, and the next challenge began. James and Vera stood side by side, ready for whatever was thrown their way. But as they moved forward, James couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The master's words echoed in his mind. Betrayal. The challenge began with an obstacle course, but it wasn't just about getting through it. There were hidden traps, obstacles that could kill in an instant, and enemies waiting around every corner. James and Vera worked together, using their skills to dodge, fight, and outsmart the traps. But as they neared the final stage, something changed. Vera glanced at James, her eyes sharp and calculating. James could see the hesitation in her gaze. She was thinking, planning. And then it hit him. Vera wasn't just focused on surviving. She was thinking about the prize, the one the tournament master had promised. She was calculating the risks, weighing the reward of betraying him. James's gut twisted as he realized the truth. This was exactly what the tournament master had wanted. He wanted them all to turn on each other, to betray their comrades in exchange for victory. The game wasn't just about survival. It was about breaking each hunter's humanity. James's heart pounded as he faced Vera. Would she betray him, or would she stand by him? But as Vera's hand reached for a hidden weapon, her eyes met his, and for a brief moment something changed. There was a flicker of hesitation. The weight of the decision hung between them. And then in that single moment of silence, James made his choice. He wouldn't betray her. He wouldn't let the tournament master win. James stepped forward, his eyes never leaving Vera's. He was ready to face whatever came next, but he wasn't about to let betrayal be the weapon that defined him. No matter what happened, Hugh was going to survive this, with his humanity intact. The atmosphere in the arena had changed. The roar of the crowd was no longer a simple wave of excitement. It had become something darker, something more tense. Every hunter, every participant, felt the weight of the tournament master's words pressing down on them. Betrayal wasn't just a choice now, it was the game. The human spirit, the sense of camaraderie, had been ripped apart by the promise of victory. James stood at the edge of the arena, his eyes focused on Vera, the alien he had been paired with. They had fought together, survived together. But now the moment had come. The last test was ahead. Vera was close, too close. He could see the hesitation in her eyes, the same doubt that had filled him the moment the master spoke of betrayal. "Stay focused," James whispered to himself. He wasn't here to win by cheating. He wasn't here to betray anyone, not even Vera. He was here to survive, to prove that humanity had more to offer than anyone ever believed. Vera stood just a few feet away, her sharp eyes calculating. She had been quick, intelligent, and deadly. James had known she was using him for some purpose, just as the tournament master had designed. But something had shifted between them in the last few moments. Was it trust? Maybe, but it felt fragile, like a thread ready to snap. They were now standing in the final section of the arena. The last challenge was brutal. They had to face a series of deadly obstacles, each designed to test both strength and wit. And now, with everything on the line, the question loomed. Would Vera betray him, or would they work together to make it through? The tournament master's voice boomed once again, shaking the walls of the arena. "The final test begins now. One will rise, one will fall. The last challenge will reveal your true nature. Survive, and the victory is yours. Fail, and death will claim you both." James's heart raced, but he knew he had to stay calm. He looked over at Vera, her face cold, unreadable. She stepped forward, moving swiftly as the first obstacle, a massive wall of spinning blades, slammed into place in front of them. The challenge had begun. Without thinking, James charged forward, ducking under the first spinning blade. He heard Vera's footsteps behind him, her movements calculated, precise. They worked together, avoiding the blades, the fire traps, and the crushing stones that fell from above. Each step felt like a breath stolen from death itself. As they reached the halfway point, the obstacles grew more intense. A section of the floor dropped open, revealing a chasm filled with deadly spikes. Vera leapt across with ease, her alien agility unmatched. James followed, but his timing was off. His foot caught the edge of the platform, and he began to fall. Without hesitation, Vera reached back, her hand outstretched. For a second, it seemed like she might pull him back. But then her eyes flickered, and in that moment, James saw it, the decision, the choice that would define them both. For a split second, it seemed like Vera might let him fall. But then something changed in her expression. Maybe it was the humanity she saw in him, the same thing that had made her hesitate before. Or maybe it was something deeper, something she couldn't explain. But she grabbed his arm and yanked him up with surprising strength, pulling him back to safety. "Don't make me regret this," she muttered, but James saw the slight tremble in her hands. She wasn't just trying to survive. She was questioning everything. And for the first time, he realized she wasn't just playing the game, she was caught in it too. They moved forward again, and the final obstacle awaited them. The last gate, a massive structure of steel, rose before them, but it wasn't a simple door, it was a trap. The tournament master's voice echoed in the chamber. "Only one will pass, you must fight. Only the one who can defeat the other will survive. The winner will be crowned champion. The loser will die." James's blood ran cold. The final test wasn't a challenge of strength. It was a fight to the death. He was paired with Vera for this final moment, but now the one who wanted to live had to kill. The realization hit him like a tidal wave. The The tournament master had orchestrated this entire thing. There was no way out. There was no way for both of them to survive. Vera's eyes locked onto his, and for a moment the world around them seemed to slow. She had been his ally, his only true partner in this deadly game, but now they were enemies. She stepped back, pulling a sharp blade from her side. The cold steel gleamed in the light, and her grip was steady. "I won't back down," she said, her voice low but fierce. James stepped back as well, his mind racing. He couldn't do this. He wouldn't. He had been through too much to kill someone who had fought beside him, but the master's voice echoed again, more urgent this time. "Choose your side, fight now." The blade in Vera's hand was raised, her eyes determined, but there was something there, a hesitation. Maybe she didn't want to do this either, but they had no choice. The rules of the tournament had forced them into this moment. James swallowed hard. He looked at Vera, seeing the confusion, the pain in her eyes. She didn't want this. Neither did he, but the question remained, how could they survive if they didn't fight? The battle began. Vera lunged, the blade flashing through the air. James sidestepped just in time, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't want to fight her, he didn't want to hurt her, but there was no other way. He had to survive, and survival meant doing whatever it took. They clashed again, the sound of metal against metal ringing out in the arena. Each strike was harder, faster. Every move was a fight for their lives. But in the back of his mind, James knew there was something else. There had to be. As they grappled, Vera's blade grazed his side, drawing blood. Pain flared in his chest, but he didn't stop. He twisted, using the momentum to disarm her, sending the blade flying across the arena. For a brief moment, they stood face to face, breathing heavily, their bodies bruised and bleeding. "You could have killed me," James said, his voice hoarse. Vera's eyes flickered with regret. "I didn't want to, but the master, he forced me." "I know," James said, his voice softening. He didn't want to kill her. He didn't want this fight to be the end. But it had to be. He had to survive. He raised his fist not to strike, but to offer her a way out. "I'll let you go. You can walk away. We don't have to finish this." Vera looked at him for a long moment, then lowered her gaze. Her shoulders slumped in defeat. She nodded. "Then we both live." And in that single moment, the fight ended. The tournament master's voice filled the arena, but James didn't hear it. He had done what the master couldn't predict. He had chosen humanity. The last test had been passed, but in his heart, James knew something else. There was still a long road ahead. And no matter what came next, he would never stop fighting. The arena was silent. The only sounds were the heavy breathing of James and Vera, the pounding of their hearts echoing in the empty space. The chaos of the tournament had momentarily paused, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. For the first time since the start of the competition, James felt the weight of what had happened. The fight, the struggle, the constant push to survive, it had all led to this point. He had thought that the final test would be about strength. He had prepared for it, trained for it, given everything he had to get to this moment. But the real test hadn't been about power. It hadn't been about defeating the monsters or outsmarting the aliens. No, the true challenge was choosing who he wanted to be in a world that had stripped everything else away. It was about his humanity. James looked at Vera. She was standing before him, her clothes torn, her face marked with sweat and blood. She was a warrior just like him, fighting for survival in a place that cared only for strength. But despite everything they had been through, despite the betrayal that hung between them like a dark cloud, there was something more. There was respect. Vera's eyes met his, and for the first time there was no hostility there, just raw, unfiltered exhaustion. "I didn't want to do this," she whispered, her voice shaky. "I never wanted to be your enemy, but the master, he made us." James nodded, his heart aching. He understood. The tournament master had manipulated them, pushed them to the edge, forced them into a corner where betrayal seemed like the only choice. But they had both survived. They had both defied the odds, chosen something different when the universe expected them to give in. "We don't have to fight anymore," James said, his voice rough. "It's over." Vera took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the arena as if looking for an escape, but there was none. The doors were locked. The tournament master's voice was gone, and the challenge had been completed. But the cost was high. They had been pushed to the brink of everything they believed in, and the emotional weight of that was heavier than any physical wound. As they stood there in the silence, the reality of their situation sank in. The tournament was not about who had the strongest muscles, the sharpest claws, or the most advanced weaponry. It was about the human will to survive, the ability to push through everything the universe threw at them and still come out the other side. It was about heart. And in that moment, James knew he had done more than survive. He had kept his soul intact. But Vera was still struggling with the aftermath. "What now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What do we do now? We're alive. But for what? To keep fighting, to keep killing." James felt the weight of her words settle on his chest. What were they fighting for? What did survival mean if it left you hollow inside, questioning every choice you made? The truth was, James didn't have the answers. All he knew was that he couldn't walk away from this fight, from this choice, without carrying something more, something deeper. "We don't have to keep fighting," he said quietly. "We've made it this far and we've done something no one thought possible. But the real fight, it's not against each other. It's against a system that wants us to destroy what makes us human." Vera's eyes softened, and for the first time the hardness in her expression seemed to fade. "You're right, I don't know what I was thinking. We were just pawns in a game that's been rigged from the start." The tournament master's voice echoed through the arena again, but this time there was no excitement, no challenge in his words. It was cold, final. "You have passed, you have proven your worth. The tournament is over. The prize is yours." But there was no joy in the master's voice, no triumph. James felt a pang of bitterness, realizing that the master's victory had been hollow from the beginning. It wasn't about survival. It wasn't about honor or glory. It was about control. The tournament had been a test, yes, but it was also a tool, a weapon designed to break them. James turned to Vera. "We don't have to be part of his game anymore. We can choose something else." Vera nodded slowly, her face reflecting the weight of her own realization. "I thought I was just fighting to survive, but maybe I forgot what I was fighting for." James offered her a hand. "Let's walk away together. We don't owe him anything. We owe it to ourselves to find something better." For a long moment, Vera didn't respond. She looked at James's hand, then back into his eyes, searching for something she had lost along the way. Finally, with a quiet sigh, she took his hand. There was a silent understanding between them now, something unspoken. They had both been broken, but they weren't beyond repair. As they turned to leave the arena, the heavy doors that had once closed them in now opened. The light outside was blinding after the darkness of the arena, but it was a welcome change. They had been through hell. They had faced impossible odds, and now they were free. But it wasn't just about escaping the tournament. It was about reclaiming something that had been taken from them, their humanity. Walking into the unknown, James felt a small but growing sense of peace settle in his chest. He didn't know what awaited them. There were no guarantees, no promises. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was on the right path. He had made the choice. He had fought with everything he had to keep his soul intact, and he had won. Vera, still holding his hand, looked up at him with a soft smile. "You're not like the others," she said quietly. James smiled back, a genuine, tired smile. "Neither are you." They didn't need to say anything more. They were no longer part of the tournament. They were free. And that in itself was the greatest victory they could have ever hoped for. The sun was rising over the distant horizon, casting long shadows across the battlefield that had once been the heart of the tournament. The air was still, but the ground beneath James and Vera's feet seemed to hum with the weight of what had happened. They had won. They had survived the impossible. And yet, as they walked away from the arena, neither of them felt like victors. James looked over at Vera, the woman who had stood beside him in every challenge, every fight. The woman who had once been his enemy and now, in this moment, was his only ally. Her face was bruised, her body battered, but there was something different in her eyes now, something more alive than before. She looked at him, a tired smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "We made it," she said softly, her voice hoarse from the screams, the fights, the pain. "But I don't know what comes next." James's heart ached as he turned to face her fully. He knew that feeling, the quiet uncertainty that came with victory. The tournament had been brutal, yes, but it had been a game where the rules had been rigged from the start. The real world, outside these walls, was something they would have to face now, together. "I don't know either," he said, his voice steady but full of the weight of everything they'd endured. "But I know this, we're free now, and that's worth something." They stopped at the edge of the arena, their feet sinking slightly into the soft earth. The tournament had been a prison in every sense of the word. They had been forced to fight, forced to betray, and forced to question their very souls. But it was over now. The tournament master, that twisted puppet master, had no more hold on them. The silence between them stretched, filled with the unspoken emotions neither of them knew how to voice. The wind blew gently across the plains, carrying with it the faintest scent of the outside world, the world they had both been trapped from for so long. They were free, but the road ahead was uncertain. James turned to Vera, his eyes searching hers. What happens now? Vera didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a deep breath, her hand tightening slightly around his. Her fingers, once poised with deadly precision, were now trembling, not from fear but from something deeper. I've spent so much of my life fighting for survival. I've never thought about what comes after. I don't know how to live when the fight is over. James felt a pang of sadness for her. He understood that. He had lived his whole life thinking the same way, always running, always fighting, never knowing how to stop. But now, with the tournament behind them, they had the chance to choose something different, something better. We'll figure it out, he said softly, together. Vera smiled, a small, fragile thing, but it was real. Together, she echoed, squeezing his hand. They stood there for a while, the rising sun casting a warm glow over the field. The blood, the sweat, the fear, it was all behind them now. But as they looked toward the horizon, they knew that the fight wasn't truly over. It had just changed. Do you think they'll come after us? Vera asked, her voice quiet but laced with a hint of worry. The question was inevitable. The tournament master might have been defeated, but the forces behind the tournament, those who had created it, those who had manipulated them both, were still out there. Would they come after James and Vera for what they had done, for breaking the rules of the game? James shook his head slowly. I don't know, but I don't think we have to worry about them anymore. We've proven something. To them, to everyone. We're not just players in their game. We're the ones who decide how the story ends. Vera nodded, her eyes fixed on the distant landscape. You're right, but I'm tired of running, James. I'm tired of being controlled by someone else's rules. I don't know where we go from here, but I don't want to be part of this galaxy's games anymore. James felt the same way. The tournament, the constant battle for survival, it had shaped them into something they didn't want to be. But now they had a chance to rebuild, to redefine themselves. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his decision settle in. We don't have to stay here. We can go anywhere, start fresh, make our own path. For once, we don't have to be anyone's soldiers. We're free. The words hung in the air, powerful and final. Vera turned to him, her eyes wide with something between hope and disbelief. You're serious, aren't you? You'd leave it all behind. James nodded. I would. I've lived my life thinking I had no choice. But now, I see that we do. We don't have to keep fighting. We don't have to keep being pawns in someone else's game. For a long moment, Vera said nothing. She looked at him, her face unreadable, then slowly, her lips curled into a smile, genuine, warm. Then let's leave this behind, together. With that, they turned their backs on the arena, walking away from the echoes of the tournament, from the games, the bloodshed, and the manipulation. It was time for something new. Time for a life where they weren't just surviving. Time for a life where they could live. As they walked, the sun rose higher, casting a golden light over the world around them. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was theirs. They had earned it. And for the first time in a long while, both James and Vera felt hope. Real hope. Hope for a future that they could control. Hope for a life that was theirs to build, not destroy. They didn't know where the road would take them. Maybe it would be a quiet village on a far-off planet, or maybe it would be a city bustling with opportunity and freedom. Wherever they went, whatever they did, they knew one thing for certain: they were no longer part of the tournament. They were no longer part of someone else's game. They were free, and that was all that mattered.